Any fighter can boost their pay and elevate their status by winning a UFC title. Because of this, most athletes will seize the opportunity to compete for a title no matter what. Nevertheless, as past events have demonstrated, a participant does not necessarily have a realistic chance of winning the gold just because they are given the chance to compete. Now, without further ado and ranked in no particular order, let's take a look at 8 UFC title challengers who never stood a chance. Number 8. Jessica I vs Valentina Shevchenko. Valentina Shevchenko is a champion who has outclassed all of her opponents since capturing the UFC Women's Flyweight title in 2018. Truth be told, none of her challengers have really stood a chance of dethroning her, so it's almost a bit unfair to single out Jessica Evil I. Still, when it was announced I was scheduled to challenge Shevchenko for the championship at UFC 238, it was hard to see a path to victory for the challenger. While she did have some solid wins on her resume, she's never shown the type of one-punch knockout power needed to have the proverbial puncher's chance. Her only finish since signing with the UFC in 2013 was a TKO due to a doctor's stoppage in her UFC 180 bout with Leslie Smith. Moreover, Jessica I is a fighter who primarily relies on her striking, an area in which Shevchenko is among the very best in the world. Simply put, there was no planet on which I would outpoint the bullet over the course of 5 rounds. As predicted, the challenger had no answer for Shevchenko's elite striking and was put away early in the second round with a highlight reel head kick. The UFC 238 contest showcased the glaring difference between a good fighter and a great one. Number 7. Antonio Silva vs Cain Velasquez. Antonio Bigfoot Silva made quite a name for himself while competing in Strikeforce with wins over Andrei Arlovsky and Fedor Emelianenko. As such, he was immediately thrown into the deep end when he entered the UFC. For his promotional debut, Silva was scheduled to face former heavyweight champion Cain Velasquez at UFC 146. Unfortunately for Bigfoot, his inaugural UFC bout couldn't have gone much worse. Velasquez's mix of power and athleticism proved to be too much for the Brazilian giant. The former champ took his opponent down and beat him into a bloody pulp on his way to picking up a first-round TKO victory. To his credit, Silva rebounded nicely with wins over Travis Browne and Alistair Overeem, which was enough to earn a title shot in what was a very shallow heavyweight division at the time. The bad news for him was that Cain Velasquez had since recaptured the heavyweight crown, setting the stage for a rematch that no one was clamoring to see. When the two met for a second time at UFC 160, Velasquez was once again able to dominate his opponent, this time putting the overmatched challenger away in just under a minute and a half. Number 6. Derek Lewis vs Daniel Cormier. The Black Beast Derek Lewis has often been able to rely on his otherworldly power to neutralize more technically sound opponents. Still, the New Orleans native's heavy hands did not come into play when he challenged Daniel D.C. Cormier for the heavyweight strap at UFC 230. With no grappling pedigree to speak of, it was clear Lewis would likely need to land a fight-ending blow if he hoped to dethrone an Olympic wrestler like Cormier. However, the odds of that were slim. Since Daniel Cormier was light years ahead of Derek Lewis in terms of grappling, most expected DC to be able to take Lewis down at will and nullify his power. In the end, the big shot never came as DC's wrestling proved to be too much for the Black Beast. A little over 2 minutes into the second round of their title bout, Cormier submitted the challenger with a rear-naked choke in a fight that played out the way most pundits expected. Number 5. Elvis Sinosic vs Tito Ortiz. The King of Rock and Rumble, Elvis Sinosic, was an Australian fighter who unfortunately struggled in the UFC. During his time in the promotion, the jiu-jitsu specialist managed to pick up only a single victory in 7 trips to the octagon. That said, his one victory happened to be a submission win over the highly touted Jeremy Horn at UFC 30. Though the win put the Aussie's record at an uninspiring 4-3-1, the higher-ups decided to give him a crack at the UFC light heavyweight champion Tito Ortiz. At the time, Ortiz was one of the pound-for-pound best. Conversely, despite a jiu-jitsu pedigree, Sinosic was not an elite mixed martial artist. His striking was below average even by early 2000s standards, and his wrestling was mediocre at best. When the two met in June of 2001 at UFC 32, the Huntington Beach bad boy used his signature ground and pound to take the challenger out in the very first round. Despite the cool nickname and competing for a UFC title, the King of Rock and Rumble would finish his career with an 8-11-2 professional record. Number 4. Dan Hardy vs Georges St-Pierre. Nottingham, England's Dan the Outlaw Hardy got off to a hot start in the UFC, winning his first 4 fights in the organization. His decision victory in a title eliminator bout with Mike Swick at UFC 105 set the stage for a showdown with the welterweight champ George "Rush" St-Pierre. While Hardy was a good striker, His lack of a grappling pedigree made him easy prey for Rush and his heavy takedown attack. When the two collided at UFC 111, it soon became clear that the champion was simply on another level in terms of speed and athleticism. While the outlaw managed to go the distance, his offense consisted of just 4 significant strikes landed over the course of 25 minutes. For his part, St-Pierre secured 11 takedowns and smothered the challenger for the majority of the fight, resulting in a remarkably one-sided unanimous decision victory. Number 3. Chael Sonnen vs. Jon Jones. Few fighters are capable of talking their way into a title fight fresh off being TKO'd by a champion in a lower weight class, which is precisely what the American gangster Chael Sonnen did. After coaching opposite one another on The Ultimate Fighter 17, Chael Sonnen met Jon Jones at UFC 159 with the light heavyweight title at stake. The American gangster generally used a takedown heavy attack to neutralize his opponents. However, this strategy was never going to work against the larger Jon Jones, who also has an impressive wrestling pedigree in his own right. Moreover, the champ also possessed a significant reach advantage to go with a far more diverse and explosive striking arsenal. In truth, it was hard to see a path to victory for the challenger heading into UFC 159. Despite severely injuring his toe, Jones managed to take his opponent out with a series of elbows and punches in the closing moments of round 1. Interestingly enough, had the first round concluded, Jones' injured toe likely would have resulted in a doctor's stoppage and cost him the light heavyweight title. Number 2. Viv Correa vs. Ronda Rousey. Recently retired UFC bantamweight Bethe Correia had a nice run in the UFC despite only being introduced to MMA roughly 2 years before her promotional debut in 2013. The accountant-turned-fighter used her slick boxing to win her first 9 pro fights, including victories over Ronda Rousey's teammates Jessamyn Duke and Shayna Baszler. Though Correia enjoyed great success against her stablemates, Rousey herself proved to be a different animal entirely. As someone who won a bronze medal in the Olympics, Rousey is a second-generation martial artist who had been training since she was a child. To put things in perspective, she already had roughly 12 years of combat sports experience when Correia first started training. The skill gap quickly became apparent when she challenged Rousey for the bantamweight title at UFC 190. In the end, it took just 34 seconds for the champ to swarm the challenger and land a knockout blow. Number 1. George Masvidal vs. Kamaru Usman. After landing the flying knee heard round the world, George Gamebred Masvidal would become one of the sport's biggest stars and eventually earn his long-awaited title shot versus the Nigerian nightmare Kamaru Usman at UFC 251. When the two first clashed at Fight Island, Usman won fairly convincingly by keeping the challenger pressed against the cage and mixing in takedowns. However, since Gamebred took the fight on short notice, combined with the fact that Usman requested it, a rematch was scheduled to go down at UFC 261. The conventional wisdom was that Usman would need to implement the same type of game plan he used in the first fight to avoid Masvidal's hands. Of course, the Nigerian nightmare shocked onlookers by not only beating him in the grappling department, but also on the feet as well. During their second encounter, Usman beat Masvidal at his own game, landing a nasty right hand in the second round that put his opponent to sleep, demonstrating that he could win the fight whenever and however he wanted to. As always, if you guys enjoyed the video, please be sure to let me know by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Apart from that, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.